easier this year because you've learned it once, right? Okay. So please make sure you've got to remember that when you do synthetic division, what do we have to be aware of? Alex? So every term has to be accounted for. If that term is missing, we insert a 0 into that spot, not a 1, because 1 means a coefficient of 1, which means you've got a term, but the coefficient must be 0. So step 1 is to make sure every term is accounted for. If 1 is missing, insert a 0. Okay, Megan, what else did you want to say? Okay, so don't drop your signs. All right, so I'm just saying to divide. I'm not asking for solutions. A solution is a what? It's an answer. It's y equals. Okay? So understand the difference. I'm asking you to use synthetic division to divide, write the answer as a polynomial. So I want the answer back as a polynomial as if we were doing long division, and that answer would be up on the top. Okay? With our remainder written as a polynomial too. All right. So we're missing a 0, so we're going to do, I do it like this. I set this little box up. And I have a -1 for the 6th, 0 for the 5th spot, a 4, a 0 for the cubed, 3, 2. Am I done? Have I accounted for every single term? I need another 0. I need one at the end because it's going 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, none. So that's going to be your y to the 0 power, or your integer term. So there's got to be a spot for that integer term. Okay? All right. So if I'm dividing by y plus 2, what value am I sticking out here? Very good. Okay? Because remember, we set y plus 2 equal to 0, and y gives me -2, and that's the value that I'm doing synthetic division with. Okay? So what's the first step that we do? You just pull down the first thing. And then it's the same thing over and over again, isn't it? Multiply. -2 times -1 is 2. 2 plus 0 is 2. -2 times +2 is -4, and 4 is -2 times 0 is, and 0 times 0 is 0. 0, 3, -6, -4, 8, 8. So see, if you hadn't put that last 0 in, you would have said that I have -4 as my remainder, which is actually incorrect, right? Your remainder is a value of 8. So now we're going to rewrite this in terms of a polynomial. I just have the coefficients. I am dividing by y plus 2. So that means the first term is going to have y to what power? Right, you just come down one value. So it's -1y to the 5th, and we just continue on down. Plus 2y to the 4th. There is no y to the 3rd. There is no y to the 2nd. Plus 3y minus 4. And then we write our remainder. Plus 8 divided by y plus 2. Do you remember this from last year? Okay. We're going to be using a lot of synthetic division this year. We're going to figure out where our graphs are crossing the x-axis, all right, using synthetic division and looking at sign changes. All right, so we really have to be proficient at synthetic division. Yes? I do something wrong? Well, negative 2 times 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 plus positive 4 is 0. Negative 2 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. Better? All right, use the remainder theorem to find the remainder when dividing x cubed minus x squared minus, this must be 5x, minus 3 by x minus 3. What does the remainder mean? Use the remainder theorem. So what are we going to do? It can be, yes, let me make sure. All of a sudden I'm drawing a blank on what they're wanting me to do on this problem. Oh, no, okay. The remainder theorem, okay, so let's do this. All right, so we're going to go, let's do it with synthetic division. We're going to go, we have a cube, squared, single, and integer. So we're going to go 1, negative 1, negative 5, negative 3, correct? And what are we going to divide by? So 1, 3 gives me 2, 6 gives me 1, 3 gives me 0. What's my remainder showing long division or showing synthetic division? Okay, so my remainder is 0. If my remainder is 0, does anybody know what that means? It does mean something. It means something about x minus 3. It's a 0. X minus 3 is a factor, which implies that x equals 3 is a 0. It's really important to know. Obviously, if I don't get 0, that means it doesn't divide out evenly, right? It doesn't factor out if I've got a remainder. But if I have no remainder, if it comes out evenly down to 0, then that x minus 3 is a true factor. All right, the remainder theorem, though, is this. Let's do substitution. And let's let x equal 3. Well, that means 3 cubed minus 3 squared minus 5 times 3 minus 3. 27 minus 9 minus 15 minus 3. What is that? That's the remainder theorem also. That using substitution, if you get whatever you get as your answer is your remainder. And it should be the same value as what you get right here when you do synthetic division. It's kind of interesting. So when they're asking you to use the remainder theorem, they are asking you to just substitute. Okay? And if you get 0, then you know that x minus 3 is a factor. If you don't get 0, then x minus 3 would not be a factor. In this case, we know that it is a factor. Okay? Does that make sense? So find the binomial factors of this. So do you remember how to do this? No? Oh. We did this last year. Too bad. Too bad, so sad, because you need it. It is. Factors of P are your last, it's your integer term. Integer term. 10. Factors of Q, there's your Q. It's your first term in descending order. So when I do P over Q, that's 10 over 1, right? Right? Which is really just. So the factors of 10 are 1, 2, 5, and however they can be either positive or negative. So I have 2, 4, I have 8 possibilities. Correct? All right, find the binomial factors. If you can, the first thing you should do is see if you can pull something out. Can I pull anything out of any of this? All right, the next thing that you want to look at is if I have 4 terms, can I chunk? You know, I mean, use some of the other things that you have. Can I chunk? I can pull these two together and get an x squared out, but I can't get that and be left with x minus 2, right? Can you see that? There's nothing that I can do over here to factor anything out to give me x minus 2, correct? So I'm, by default, having to do this p over the q. So we set up our synthetic division, and unfortunately, this is very trial and error, okay? This is 1, negative 2, negative 13, negative 10. And so let's try negative 1. Bring down the first one. Negative 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Negative 3. 3. Oh, look at that. Negative 10. 10. 0. Is this a factor? And we know that it's a factor because our remainder is 0. Therefore, we are left, we started with a cubed, and we're ending up with a what? Also known as a squared. What's the correct term for a squared polynomial? Okay, what's the correct term for a parabola? It's a quadratic. Quadratic is the highest degree of 2. You know this, okay? Therefore, I'm left with x squared minus 3x minus 10. I look to see if I can factor. If I don't see the factor immediately, then I would jump to the... Ooh. I wouldn't do completing the square unless I absolutely have quadratic formula. Okay? But I'm just wanting the factors, right? So this one should probably factor nicely. I'm not looking for the solutions. You understand the difference? Factor versus solution. And on a quiz, if I ask for factors and you give me solutions, you lose points because you did not do what I asked. I want them in parentheses. I don't want x equal. That's my solution. Okay? All right, so this factors nicely. This is going to be x minus what? And x plus. So what are my factors of my polynomial? X plus 1 from this dude, x minus 5, and x plus 2. So do not forget that first factor that we used to take our cubed polynomial down to a quadratic, which allowed us to then factor. Yes? It would. And we know that's where it's crossing the x-axis, right? We would know that this is cubed, that's positive, so the tails are in the first and the third, and we know that the y-intercept is what? Negative 10, right? So if I asked you to go a step further and process all of this, which I very well could, I would know that it happens at here, here, and 5, and down here. I know that it's got to do this, 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 and this. But why is it oh my? But it's a multi-step problem. That's what pre-calc is. Put all this together. Don't just tell me what the solutions are. Tell me what the solutions are and graph it. Because why else are we finding these solutions? Not just to make you do the work. There's got to be a reason. Let's look at the big picture. Okay? Let's go beyond what the book is asking. Okay, last one. So find the values of j so that the remainder of... So find the value of j so that the remainder of x cubed plus 6x squared minus jx, there's my j, minus 8, when divided by x minus 2 is 0. So I'm saying what? If I know that my remainder is 0, what am I saying about x minus 2? That it's a factor, which means what do we know? We know then that the root is what? X is equal to what? Okay. So if I'm supposed to get this, equal to 0, right? Because it's only going to equal 0 if I can find the appropriate value for j when x is 2. What am I going to do? Substitute in 2. 2 cubed plus 6 times 2 squared minus j times 2 minus 8 equals 0. Okay? So that's 8 plus 24 minus 2j minus 8 equals 0. These 8's drop out. Negative 2j is equal to negative 24. Therefore, by default, j is equal to 12. So for all of this to be 0, when x minus 2 is my factor, the only value that j can be is 12. Six times 4. That's all right. Well, that's like when I multiply and I get something goofy. You know, you're looking at all the hard math and you're forgetting your easy math, right? That's a bit. I have j equals 12. Oh, I'm sorry. That makes no sense. Why would it be negative, Alex? All right, are we good on this? Does this make sense? All right, make sure.
So, in all of these, you're never asking for the solution.
I'm asking for a factor, means leave it in parentheses. If I ask for a solution, tell me what x is equal to, or y, or k, or whatever that variable is. Very important that you understand the difference. Okay? All right, so remember, when I'm asking you on these binomial factors, you might want to write this down. If I'm asking for the binomial factors, you know, if it's 4 terms, see if you can chunk. Okay? If not, then do the p over the q to find a factor. Which means you're going to have to do synthetic substitution. Then when you bring it down to a quadratic, see if you can factor. Hopefully you can. I think today on this lesson, factoring will be what you'll be able to do. Okay? Because remember, I'm not finding solutions, so the quadratic formula would give me a solution, wouldn't it? And then we'd have to put it back into a factored form, which would require a little more work or manipulation. And I don't think that they're going to ask you that. So I think factoring, probably once you get it down to a quadratic, is all that you're going to need to do. And don't forget if using P over Q, the first factor in your answer. In other words, whatever that P over Q is that worked with the synthetic division that gave you 0 as your root, don't forget to put that down in your answer. That's a place where a lot of people tend to lose that answer or that factor. So don't forget about it. Okie dokie? Any questions about this? About this? Allie? Because I did my factors of 10 over my factors of 1, and that was just 10. And factors of 10 are 1, 2, 5, and 10. Then it would have been 10 over 2, which is 5, and my factors of 5 would be 1 and 5, plus and minus.